think it's important that we share, that we communicate, that we are open, and that we grow together to achieve.
Because we are the voice of what wellness is about, and it's up to us to spread the message.
Good afternoon, everybody, and good morning to those from North and South America. Delighted to have you with us for Professional Beauty's World Spa and Wellness Conference. I'd just like to say a few thank yous, particularly to Jean-Guy and the World Wellness Weekend for putting together such a great series of panels, and particularly this one, The Future of Wellness Tourism. I'm going to introduce briefly our panel today. And in no particular order, but Andrew Gibson, Senior VP of Sensei and Chairman of the Wellness Tourism Association, Catherine Droger, founder of Droger and Company and founder of the Wellness Tourism Summit, Trent Monday, Senior VP International of Mandara Spas, Camille Hoheb, who's the President of the Wellness Tourism President Wellness Tourism Worldwide, Adam Glickman, Principal of Paralux, and last but not least, Jean-Claude Baumgarten, former President and CEO of the World Travel and Tourism Council. As you can see and hear, an international panel, ladies and gentlemen. A couple of housekeeping points. We are broadcasting live across 10 channels of social media. If you're looking at us on social media, welcome. But if you want to join the panel, click on professionalbeauty.uk, follow the link, and you'll be able to join live on Zoom. Time permitting, we will be taking your questions on Zoom. So do post them on the Q&A there, and Jean-Guy and I will post them to the panel. Now, before we go to the meat of our discussion, the future of wellness tourism, I'm very proud to announce a soft launch of the Cancer Aware Directory that the professional group is supporting and funding. Last year, through our conferences around the world, in fact, almost to the day, we were discussing in Thailand in our Phuket conference how spas can better treat people with cancer or been touched by cancer. And we had a panel there, and Julie Bach from Wellness for Cancer said, look, I want to start this directory. Who will fund us? Who will support us? And I stupidly, or perhaps not so stupidly, stuck up my hand. And it's taken a bit longer, but Julie's been the driving force of this. I want to stress, though, that she's incorporated, and we've incorporated, every other organization and provider, including people like Christine Clinton and many others. And I'm going to hand over to Julie Bach, who's going to explain a little bit more about CancerAwareDirectory.com as a resource to reach out, so that if you've been touched by cancer or know somebody who's been touched by cancer, you can be looked after by our industry in an appropriate manner. Over to you, Julie.
Thank you very much. And again, this was driven by the audience at Professional Beauty in Thailand. So it's something that Mark has graciously stood up to support. And you should be able to see my screen, correct? So what we have done is the last year we've storyboarded, and now we're in beta version for the first standalone global cancer aware directory of businesses and practitioners globally. Right now, our industry has really stood up for COVID, providing social impact in many ways. And this is another way that we can start preparing for when we reopen. So right now, it's just inward facing, no outward facing at all. The soft launch right now has 250 locations, and it is growing exponentially as we bring on more trainers globally with their own niches and across 54 countries. Again, the phase one is just to identify and vet those trained locations and therapists. And you'll see a few of the brands that have participated. Six Senses has trained all of their properties, Como Shambhala as well. Four Seasons has trained over 15 properties with multiple trainers. Accor, Bannatynes, Mandarin Oriental, and Sandals have all trained all of their properties as well. So it's a time for us to celebrate together because social impact is going to be critical now and going forward. So for each brand, they will add all of their trained locations and have a microsite for each location. So we will look at day spas, hotels, salon, resort spas, even hospital spas and providers as well. So it's meant to be the first comprehensive directory of its kind. There's only 4 steps to create a microsite, giving information about the facility or location, a tagline and description, answering some questions, and then listing your services. So quickly, just some highlights. It's important to be transparent with the user. If some people are only going to work with people with cancer after treatment, we need to let them know that. If we're only going to be able to provide 1 or 2 treatments off of our vast menu, we need to let them know that. Or if we can modify all of our treatments. So it's important to be transparent. There's just a few questions to answer. Then you just describe each location, you upload your images, and you connect to social media. Again, it is not live external. This is internal right now, planting a seed for when we're ready to reopen. Upload your spa service menu, and then to identify the services that your center or locations are trained to work with people with cancer. And as you can see, as I said, this is the most comprehensive directory there is. So if you look at this property with Six Senses in Thailand, health coaching, massage, facials, manicures. We even trained with yoga and meditation. So it's a conglomeration of many different kinds of trainers globally, which is why we have this robustness. And please remember that enduring companies during this time are going to be more human focused and focused on well-being. And with the statistics, especially in Asia, being 50% of the cancer population, even as we reopen and we travel locally and regionally, there will be people who have cancer or been touched by cancer that are going to be traveling during this time. So I just want to thank Mark for giving me a few minutes to let you know about the soft launch and contacting us to let us know if you would be part of this directory or not. So back over to you, Mark. I think I did this probably in 3 minutes. So Jean-Guy, you have an extra 2 minutes now.
Thank you very much, Julie. We'll be, I want to stress, obviously, this is a non-profit and no cost situation. It is a resource, and we'll be gathering. What we want to do is gather a reasonably wide support from properties and individuals across the world before we go live to consumer. So thank you, Julie. Thank you, Jean-Guy. We'll get straight into the future of wellness tourism, and really starting, wellness tourism was a very strong trend before COVID. It was going twice as fast as regular tourism. Can I ask the panel, what is their perspective? What is your perspective for the next 12 to 6 to 12 months? And Andrew, can I ask you to kick it off, please?
Well, I think we're seeing the first waves of optimism starting to come. There is a report by Travel Weekly in the UK. I'm actually going to put the link here on chat for everybody. But that report is a survey of travel agents in the UK done between April and May of this year, where they say something around about 86% of those people surveyed still intend to take some kind of a holiday this year, and including overseas travels. Now, this is the British market, but still intending to take overseas travels. I find it astonishing that it's such a high percentage. I think people are still bravely optimistic that they're going to be able to travel and get to go to their destinations. But if we look at China as well, you're also seeing some evidence that people are traveling, and mainly domestic travel, but they are traveling and going away to stay at hotels and resorts. Wellness travel, I think, will take a little bit longer. So I've got two points that I want to get across. First of all, I think that is very dependent on the ability to get to your destination. That's why domestic travel will be easier, because you can just hop in your car and drive. But the airlines are showing signs of recovery. I've just been trying to book a flight to Sweden from Los Angeles, and I've had the flight changed 4 times as they consolidate and rationalize on their flights. But it is possible to actually fly. So I think the Southern Hemisphere, because if we miss the summer this year, and we're absolutely at a critical point right now, if we miss the summer in the Northern Hemisphere and we don't get people to be able to go on holiday because it's not yet open, then I think the first recovery will be in the Southern Hemisphere, Southeast Asia, and that will be over the Q3, Q4 of this year. And for the UK and European markets, the North American market, it won't come back, possibly a little bit at Q4 of this year, but moving into Q1 and Q2 of next year. So I think that's one. And the second thing I think is that I do believe that wellness tourism has got a wonderful opportunity, because we socially integrate, and we've been socially deprived of that integration for now a couple of months, and it's likelihood that it will continue in some form for another month or two. So therefore, people will be itching to get back and to want to participate in some form of wellness, particularly wellness, because they'll want to get the ability to reconnect. And I think that it's quite interesting to see in Arizona, which has just opened up, a neighboring state to where I'm staying at the moment. They opened up, and the salons and the spas were flooded with business. People were itching to get back with no concerns about health or safety or distancing or hygiene. They just wanted to get back to those treatments. So there are encouraging signs.
Thank you, Andrew. Catherine, would you like to comment?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mark. It's great to be part of the panel. From my perspective, just to build on what Andrew has said then, I really believe that, as we all know, domestic is the first response in terms of our opportunities to travel. And when we speak specifically about wellness travel, I believe it's going to be the secondary wellness traveller. So according to the work that we do at the Global Wellness Institute, what I mean by the secondary wellness traveller are those people that are taking a trip, whether it's leisure or for business, but specifically for leisure in this context, that the intention of the trip is, a generic leisure trip, but they want to add a wellness component to it. So I feel like this group, which represents about 89% of all wellness trips globally, approximately, I think, yeah, it was 89% of all trips globally and 86% of expenditure. So it's the big pile, the big pool of wellness opportunity. The rest of those primary wellness trips around a dedicated reason that you're solely traveling for wellness. So I feel that that's really going to be the opportunity that unfolds as our first area for the globe, and I think that's our area around, as Andrew said, nature is a foundation for that. There's a huge amount of pent-up demand at the moment across the globe to get out, and so wellness-based experiences that have a link and a connection to nature and nurture, I think they're the two things that we need to think about: nature and nurture.
Thank you. Trent, I know you've got views on this. Would you share them?
Yeah, Mark, I think obviously everybody knows that the international travel's a while away. It's obviously domestic first, and in some countries, interstate travel is still not even allowed. So I think the interstate travel comes first, then it obviously becomes domestic within the same country. The next level, of course, becomes those regional hubs. There's been a lot of talk about these travel bubbles between various countries. So Australia is talking about New Zealand will be their travel bubble, and people can go freely between those two countries initially. And, that probably comes maybe towards the end of this year with a bit of luck. I think it's probably until the end of next year, realistically, until things get back to realistic levels of what they were pre-COVID. And I think what becomes really interesting is this idea of quarantine resorts, where you literally would go into a country and stay within that resort and not go anywhere else. And that effectively becomes your quarantine period, because you go off on a 10 or 12-day trip. You never leave that bubble within that actual country. And I think that creates an interesting opportunity for wellness type facilities, particularly because if you're going to a facility like that, you've got that bubble inside. You do some deals with government and medical people to have you certified to be within that resort. You're in quarantine. I think that's a big opportunity for a lot of wellness specific resorts as well.
No, I agreed. Camille, what's your point?
Thanks, Mark. I'm delighted to be here. You know, I think as safety, the perceptions of safety improve, more people will be participating in activities like travel. And as Andrew and Catherine had mentioned, the itch to get out, certainly I think it's safe to say people want to celebrate, they want to reconnect, they want to experience something new, they want to reinvest in themselves, they want to create memories. And that's why wellness travel will bounce back. Tourism in general will bounce back. There's going to be people that stay close to home, but there is going to be a sliver, some small percentage of wellness adventure travelers who are going to, be ready to take a trip. Mostly probably more millennials than baby boomers. And as far as distance, tacking on to what Trent said, it is going to be more, I think we're going to see more local travel eventually as things open up, more regional and then short haul. But I think cruise lines are going to have a tough time coming back. Airlines are going to have a tough time coming back. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting was I saw that Insure My Trip travel insurance has skyrocketed, something like an increase of 200%, the highest increase over their 20 years. And they're expecting that 30% of travelers will purchase travel insurance, especially the cover for all reasons clause. I think that's really interesting. I think lastly, the stress of self-quarantine is a great reason for people to get out and travel, especially in groups, girls' getaways, family travel, intergenerational travel. And I think solo travelers will also want to get out. They'll want to get out in nature. They'll want to get back to fitness trips. Those are some of my perceptions.
Thank you. Adam?
Sorry, I was muted. Sorry about that. Hello, everybody. It's Adam, and thanks for having me join on the panel today, Mark and Jungi. To me, I think the big opportunity that we're going to see, and I'll build on what Catherine said, the work that we're doing with GWI and the recent wellness tourism study we put out. We'll talk more today about kind of some enhancements to that. But we definitely saw that the connection to nature was something that was critical for people before the virus. And now that we're looking after the virus, what I'm reading mostly about is, and believe is this opportunity that we'll see the expansion of the term wellness tourism. The term wellness was already being greenwashed or slapped around pretty regularly before the virus came to market. And now I believe that we will see more and more businesses try to kind of tack on wellness to everything to try to appeal to customers. And so I think the opportunity for businesses, and especially as we're thinking about customers traveling and going to new destinations, is how do you align with what customers are seeking and not just come across as being inauthentic? And so some of those needs that I think will really begin to dial up are that reconnection to nature and kind of having more spaces versus the seclusion like Camille and Catherine had hit on before. But I do believe that we'll see a bit more of trying to see or seeing properties that are really drilling into consumer needs and understanding what different travelers are wanting when they're traveling, and they'll begin to market those specific things versus just the generalities of wellness tourism. So as a really simple example, before the virus, we found through our study work with GWI that about 50% of people said the primary reason why they went on a trip related to wellness was to adjust their health and reboot their focus. I'd expect to see that number skyrocket. I think in our future phase of thinking about wellness tourism, it's going to have us all as marketers, as destinations, as properties, think about how do we go one click further and actually explain what that reboot means and show people what options for what different kinds of travel will start to look like.
So thank you. Jean-Guy and I aren't going to go around the table with everybody, but just to start us off, I thought it would be good to hear from the whole panel on this question. Jean-Claude, last but not least, do you have any views on this?
Yes, well, there are three aspects actually. A is infrastructure, airlines, train, roads. If you run an airline, which I participated for many years in Air France for 28 years, if you apply the safety procedure required now, you only have 50% of your seats available for sale. So either you lose a hell of a lot of money or you increase the price per ticket. That is something we have to watch very carefully. The second thing is the clarity of the requirements of the countries, quarantine or not, visa or not. So that will, in my point of view, and I am on a couple of working panels looking at that, will lead the people, the travelers, to travel domestically. We can see in the first approach, this year will be mainly touristic. The international travel will only go to countries which have a good or better record how they handle the COVID. Now look at the statistics nowadays. You can see that countries like the US, for example, has not such a good record and people will not go there. Our customers will be very, very careful. So in other words, this year domestic, except for destinations which are considered as safe, and the rush, because the need, the push, the willingness of the customer to travel is great. It will only be open when those first requirements on the long haul will be solved. How can the airlines be profitable with a 50% load factor? Just to let you know, Air France got 7 billion euros from the French government as a loan. American Airlines, United Airlines will get hell of a lot of money from the central government, which is quite new in the United States. We have to be very careful and watch that. So my point is that the trend, the willingness to travel is here. It will be domestic in the next couple of months, and slowly the international traffic will start next year.
Thank you. Thank you, Jean-Claude. Over to you, Jean-Guy.
Thank you, Jean-Claude. Catherine, I'd like to give you this first question, because we've seen in the past few weeks a lot of big companies completely canceling their business travel budgets, and senior executives are not allowed now to travel on their business travel budget. How are business hotels coping with all their conference rooms, convention centers?
Yeah, this area is like leisure travel, business travel and corporate events have been completely decimated. So, you know, we're going back to ground zero in this space. And, you know, the challenge is, you know, for them to start planning for the return. Australia, if I speak to it specifically a little bit about what's happening in Australia and like many countries, the government is looking at like a 3-step framework for COVID safe relief for the entire business groups. And so what that means is that individual organisations need to look at their COVID safe plan for reopening and reoperating. And from a kind of domestic, from a business events perspective, obviously domestic business events and business corporate travel will return first. I know we're quite used to working now online in this online space, and so some of that will continue, but I do believe that corporate travel and business events will return in some form. And so while everyone is making these new COVID safe plans, I was actually speaking to SG Clean this week. So SG Clean are a fantastic partnership between the Singapore Tourism Board and their hotels, their restaurants, etc. And it was led by KPMG that were part of the partnership around that. And these guys are looking at very practical implementational tools for the country to reopen and reoperate. So I think they have great learnings from SARS and things like that. So what I think is interesting, if we bring this back to the wellness concept and the wellness kind of anchor in this discussion, is that we did some research on, the wellness travel market from a business perspective, and we asked the question around what business business travelers are prepared to pay for a wellness accommodation that meets their wellness experiences. So really, is this of value? And this was pre-COVID. And what we were really excited about was 40% of business travelers said they were prepared to pay a premium for accommodation that could meet their wellness needs. Now, that's a pretty significant number pre-COVID. And what was interesting, that 44% of those people were prepared to pay more than 10%. So I think that gives us an insight into post-COVID, or when we're allowed to travel and do some business travel again, is how do we meet those business travellers' needs, because they will be prepared to pay a premium for those offerings. I think that's something for us to really think about. So it's a premium pricing opportunity down the track. I'm not saying right this minute, but down the track. And again, thinking that domestic business travel first.
Thank you so much, Catherine, because from the past panels we've seen, attendees really love when numbers, statistics are shared. So thank you so much for providing that. Trent, what is your take on this, business travel?
Look, I mean, most of the business hotels that we're talking to in various countries, mates that I've got, businesses, hotels that we do business with, nobody's expecting more than 30% occupancy really by the end of this year. I think in terms of MICE business, meetings, conventions business, nobody's expecting any of that this year, probably not for most of next year. And I think if they want to get smart about it, they've got to think about using that convention space, that meeting space that they've got, because a lot of hotels have got great space down there that could be utilized. From a wellness perspective, it could be used to expand on your wellness offerings. The hotel gym is something that is usually fairly confined. You could potentially relocate that gym to a larger meeting space to allow more space between people interacting, that kind of opportunity. I think there's a lot of retail pop-up experiences. Basically take that meeting space and put in pop-up experiences, whether they're fitness related, wellness related, even just general retail, because a lot of retailers are going to be out of business or running out of business. They're going to have all this stock left to move. I think there's a lot of interesting things that could be done with that meeting space in general. The only other thing I'd say is that I think it's important to remember that we're still in crisis right now. And the general rule is, in crisis, you plan, you don't act. The opportunities come in the chaos on the other side of this thing. So I think right now it's a case of looking at all the alternatives, exploring the options, but then the chaos on the other side, once we start opening, that's when the real opportunities come up. And that's the time you need to be agile and nimble enough to act and react and adapt.
Oh, thank you. Very out of the box and about space optimization and being agile. Well done, Trent. Adam, you've been working for a big hotel group a while ago, consulting others now. Tell us about loyalty plans and loyalty schemes that you're seeing right now.
Yeah, thanks, Jean-Guy. I think the big opportunity beyond, and I agree with Trent, we're not going to see conferences just appear back overnight. I think the opportunity is to focus on loyalty and how do you retain those kind of top tier customers. And in the U.S. the U.S. is the hub or headquarters of many of the world's biggest hotel companies, and there's been a lot of governmental interaction between the government and the heads of these hotel companies, talking about how much the hospitality industry specifically has been impacted as a result the virus. And so through that, you're now beginning to see just these early days of kind of loyalty message from some of these hotel companies to their customers. And so I think things that have started, that'll progress through 2020 into 2021, and smaller properties I think can latch on to what some of these bigger hospitality giants are doing, is extending loyalty tiers through 2021, meaning if you're a gold member, you're automatically extended for 12 months to keep that loyalty with the hotel group. During this period, brands don't want to lose the customers that they've gained over such a long time just because they're not traveling. Continuing engagement paths where brands are sharing kind of tips and tricks and ideas from the things that they would do in their properties had customers been there with them, that they can potentially do at home. So something as simple as food and beverage ideas, drink ideas from kind of VIP bartenders at certain brands to, again, continue that engagement. So I think loyalty is one, that kind of direct customer engagement is another thing that we're beginning to see. And the third area that I think will impact both small business travel and leisure travel is we're beginning to see some of the hospitality companies put special offers out for prepaid gift cards to basically incentivize you to build a stronger connection with that company and have basically cash in the bank for future travel. That's definitely leisure focused, but as you think about business travel for smaller companies that don't have infinite budgets, that is another way to drive that connection and that hook. So at the end of the day, I agree with where Catherine was going. And she brought up the GWI study we did. There's no question a strong value for what customers want as it relates to wellness and business travel. What I will say, tied specifically to business travel, that we'll see from some of the larger hospitality giants is just this strong recentered focus around cleanliness and safety. And that's where, in my mind, business travel lies. When business travel starts up again, the companies that are sending team members abroad or sending them domestically are going to want to know they are safe. And one of the values that larger organizations can put out are major partnerships talking about cleanliness and protocol and process, similar to what Singapore as a kind of a destination itself is doing. So I think we'll definitely see more of that. And there's an opportunity for smaller destinations or smaller properties that are not part of a big parent umbrella to put their own consistent platforms in place to kind of attract customers and bring that safety element to life the same way the big guys are.
Thank you, Adam. Picking up on Jean-Claude's experience with Air France and the airlines sector, with many planes grounded and travel bans, visa restrictions, and so forth, what is your take on popular or the more affordable wellness tourism? Catherine, what do you...
I guess from my perspective is that wellness travel and wellness tourism is for everyone. As an industry, we traditionally have always thought about the premium space being, the main game, the higher yield, the immersive retreats, we talk about that. But if we think about it, and that to go back to my original point around, secondary wellness travelers as being the bigger group, I think within that pot is affordable wellness travel. And now more than ever, this is a segment that everybody should be thinking about if you have a product or offering that can pivot to this. So if you've got a current product or offering that could be split to multiple price points and offerings in this space of affordable wellness travel, I think it's one to be thinking about. And also I think people are in the business of regular travel and regular tourism that may not define themselves as a wellness travel operator. I think this is an opportunity for them to think about how do they create accessibility and affordable wellness connections. I think with this kind of, if we get ourselves into the mindset of the consumer and we think about, what are they looking for from a safety and a security and a holiday perspective, I think we need to really look at how, what things might immerse as new product or development opportunities. And by this, I mean simple things like, if people don't want to go on public transport and be in crowded spaces, cycle tourism and cycle trips, walks, all these sorts of things. This is about affordable, accessible wellness travel opportunities for the industry.
Thank you. Adam, back to you.
I'll just build on where Catherine was going. And to me, we said earlier in the panel, this idea of the drive-to market, particularly for countries like the US or Canada, where there is a massive space, or Central Europe, where there are massive spaces you can connect to when borders are open, that the drive-to market in the lower price point is definitely a big opportunity. As people feel a little bit more comfortable getting out of their immediate home, they're looking for escapes. And so one area that can apply to, particularly as we're thinking about wellness travel, is destinations or properties, or even small community rentals like Airbnbs or VRBOs that are marketing themselves around different attributes that line up to the travel needs of customers. And so I'll kind of go back to what we talked about earlier, this idea that the definition of wellness tourism is absolutely expanding, and that we can't just focus on, the traditional key modalities or treatments that people are seeking out, but use this as a marketing opportunity to say, how do we leverage wellness related opportunities in nature, outdoors, through cycling tours, through walking trips, to connect with customers and bring them into properties that may not have otherwise thought of a smaller property or a very regional property as a wellness destination. But in reality, it's a great escape for a customer that lives in a market and is, cooped up in their condo, or has been cooped up in their, large city home for a really long time. So I would say for me, the opportunity is definitely thinking about drive-to markets, and as branders or marketers and businesses, really turning upside down who we would have expected our core customer to be. So if you're a mid-priced property in a kind of regional market that's 3 or 4 hour drive from a major market like a New York or a Chicago, how do you go win those customers that may have flown around the world or flown to a destination in the Caribbean or Mexico and aren't comfortable doing that, and now market yourself as a great solution for them? So to me, the opportunity here of thinking about this kind of mid-priced wellness tourism path is expanding your customer marketing plan and really understanding who is your new customer, not just being caught up in, these were my customers of the past, so I'm going to go get those exact same customers in the future.
And what you're saying specifically is local, isn't it? Drive-to.
Yeah, absolutely. It's at least at the starting point, it's trying to address who's your close drive to, or even into the next step when people are more comfortable flying, close fly to with, single point of, flight connections that are easy access. And who is that customer?
Thank you. I'm going to take a question from one of our visitors, if you like, and forgive me if I pronounce your name wrong, Didier Levoix. Didier wants to ask, how do you see the loss of money from most people on the planet and the impact on prices of hotels and resort stays? So that impact on cost by the financial hit many of us are taking. Andrew or Trent, which one of you wants to go first on that?
I'm happy to have a stab at that because that's a very interesting question. And I look at an example of what happened in Las Vegas in 2008 and 2009 when the financial crash really hit that city very hard. There are two strategies to this, Didier. And there's the one strategy where you hold your price and you're prepared to therefore sacrifice the occupancy and keep your price. And then there's the other strategy where you actually drop your price and hope you'll pick up the volume. And I favor the former, where you actually hold your price and are prepared to not have such a good occupancy. And the reason for that is because you've got to place a value on your business. And if you are discounting, you're saying that the value of your business is no longer there and you're offering a much cheaper option. And it becomes very difficult to then get back the same customer, the high-class customer, because you have a different category of customer that will go for the discount or the dropped price. So I think you have to, I'm in favor of keeping your price. Obviously, cash considerations come into that, but you'll find most of the luxury hotels will tend to work on a strategy of holding price, whereas the more budget hotels will probably work on the strategy of cutting costs. I don't believe in cutting costs. I'm a very front of house person that believes that revenues are infinite, costs are finite, and they can only be cut so far, and then you start to lose the entire quality of what you're doing. Trent?
Trent, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with anything Andrew said. I mean, look, personally, I think the line between the haves and the have-nots is going to be even more defined on the back of this. I think those people with money who've kept jobs, they're still going to spend, and they're still going to spend at the same price. So to discount substantially, I think, is short-sighted. I do think that mid-market segment is in serious danger. I think the low level, it's always, being in the messy middle is always a challenge. There's a lot of hotels in this part of the world, in Malaysia, that have already announced they're not opening. I think I've heard of about 10 hotels already that have said they will not reopen on the back of this. We were shut down seriously for 47 days, like a pretty hard lockdown. And still, of course, there's not a lot going on here. So, there will be a lot of hotels go by the wayside. There's a lot of opportunities there for investors to want to pick up the properties. And then there's interesting opportunities, I think, to think about what we're going to use those spaces for. But, I think to Andrew's point, cutting costs is a slippery slope. It doesn't matter what price you put something. If people don't feel that level of trust and that level of safety and security, they're not going anyway.
Mark, if I could add just one quick thought on that topic. I think one of the trends that, if you kind of review some of the hospitality company Q1 reports or stats, the extended stay segment, kind of brands like Residence Inn or Staybridge Suites, those brands have kind of performed the best through this. And so those numbers are not great, but when you look at them relative to the rest of the hotel industry segments, part of that is kind of the idea of space, a small kitchen, that concept lines up to the term value. And when I think about pricing, to me, there's obviously the opportunity at kind of the high-end luxury market. And I totally agree with Andrew. Don't just drop your price to try to win people that don't exist. They're not going to travel till they're comfortable. But the idea in the mid-upper market, in my view, is really try to optimize value, come up with ways to develop kind of partnerships, packages, local access points that entice people to see a good value in a short getaway that is over the comfort hurdle of getting someone to get away. So if we change the mindset of, we can't convince people that don't feel safe and comfortable to travel by changing price. What we can do is, once somebody's over that hurdle and they feel safe and comfortable, make sure that we're reinforcing that safety and then offer them a really good value, which is what's incentivizing them to go. So I
totally agree with Adam on that. Value, it doesn't matter what the price point is, the price point that you're comfortable with. But if you are offering value to your customers, and that value is determined by your customers, that's the key to keeping your customers coming. And I think that's the important thing here, is to message that you're providing good value.
Can I also, as a consumer who was enticed by a major spa group to book something for Christmas, I also found it so there was a incentive, a time-limited incentive, and it was very hard and complex to redeem that. So I lost interest. So I think let's keep it.
So they didn't offer you value.
Well,
you lost the value. You lost the value proposition of that.
Exactly, and I was up for doing it.
Transparency is such a critical word, and it gets defined differently or kind of interpreted differently across languages and regions. But that idea of, here, I have a great deal for you, but I'm going to put in all these layers and complexity so you can never use it, that doesn't build loyal customers. Very clear and honest transparency, especially now when people are so concerned on so many things and stress is higher than it's been. That idea of transparency lines up exactly with value.
So Mark, you could do a whole session just purely on this, because it's so controversial and so many people have so many different opinions. I'd love to get into that one.
What, the transparency?
No, the value of discounting versus pricing.
Well,
yeah. Everybody has an opinion on that.
Well, interestingly, I chaired a salon group yesterday from Ireland, and they all want to put the prices up because of the increased costs they're going to face.
Jean-Claude, go ahead, and then I'll move on to the next question when you're also included. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. The issue here is, I think you're right. You have to keep the value. I'm on board of 2 or 3 major companies. And what they do now, each of them, is to focus on their loyal customers and give them a fantastic value for their price. However, the fear in all of them is that somebody will cut the prices among them. So what we have said here is true, that's logical, but the market sometimes is illogical.
Jean-Claude, I'd like to get back for a second to something that Andrew said about value, but also about values and the necessity to have good storytelling. You're the chairman of the Wellness Tourism Association, and a few weeks ago you hosted a very interesting webinar that I was lucky to participate in, and Professor Terry Stevens was there, and he was talking about how destination marketing was evolving into competent destination management, and how not just resorts, but cities, local communities, if they want to attract new clients, they have to focus on travel for what? Travel, okay, but travel for what? And travel why? And those destinations would need to be admired by the public so that they would vote with their money to go there and to support the local community. Would you like to expand on that? Because it was a very interesting point. And then we'll have...
Yes, the word Terry used was admired. I think that was a great word. People are going to go to places and brands that they admire, was the terms that he used. And I think it comes back, if you just listen to what Jean-Claude said a moment ago about where people will travel to, they will travel to places where they feel safe. And if they feel that the country or the destination has not managed this crisis, and I love crisis chaos, that's great, Trent, I'm going to use that, I'm going to plagiarize that. But if people don't go to countries that they feel have not managed and coped well, then that's because they don't admire the leadership and the qualities that that particular destination has got. And so what Terry was saying is, in your company, you've got to have your brand values communicated. You've got to have communication of what you've done for your employees, what you've done for your loyal guests, and what you intend to do for the future, because that's how people are going to define you. And that kind of leads into a thought that I could expand on a lot, but it's talking about, where do people go next? Where are people going to go? We've talked a lot about domestic travel, and we'll talk a little bit perhaps about international travel, but people are going to go to places where they trust, where they feel it's safe to go, and it aligns with their values. They're going for the experience. I don't think people are going to travel to places. So if we've talked about domestic travel and you're saying, okay, now how do I get the luxury travel, or how do I get people to come to me? Don't focus on your destination, focus on the experience that you're going to provide them. What are the experiences? And there are a number of different things, such as people are going to be interested in the work and the things that you've done for your employees. They're going to need some form of counseling. There may be opportunities for family unity as the family wants to get out. There are a lot of things on trust and reliability. And I think those are the things that you're going to communicate to people and say, we care. We care, and we care about our employees, we care about the environment, we care about the community, and we care about our loyal guests. And that's what will bring people to.
Yeah, thank you. Quickly, Camille, I'd like you to mention an example that you brought it as we were preparing, about a property that Andrew knows really well, the Fairmont Scottsdale Princess, and something that they do, weaving corporate social responsibility with the wow effect. Can you expand on that? And then we'll hear it from Trent and Jean-Claude.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I thought it was really interesting because they are offering these movies on big screens. So basically the local residents can come and watch a movie from the comfort and the safety of their car. And the corporate responsibility piece is that the property then provides meals for the employees and their families. And I thought that was quite wonderful. It speaks exactly to what Andrew was mentioning.
And Camille, I know Jack Miller, who's the GM over at the Fairmont there. He is such an innovative guy. He is always creating. Even before COVID, he was coming up with innovation, and he has an enormous amount of exhibition space there. So he is being very creative in thinking about how he can serve his local community.
Thank you both. Before we hear from Jean-Claude and back to Mark, Trent, you mentioned something when we were preparing about branding versus selling.
Yeah, look, I think when you talk about being admired, it is a question of branding over selling, because right now you can't sell, or at least people can't really buy, or if they do buy, they can't use it. They have to defer the purchase, or at least the use. So I think right now, working on being admired, doing the right thing in the community, amongst your people, amongst your staff, amongst your guests, that's just smart strategy right now, because it's about building brand, and brand is what matters, I think, in the chaos. I mean, I think that's the time when you go into sales mode once the chaos starts. But right now you build the brand, and being admired is all about building brand, in my opinion.
Thank you. Jean-Claude,
Yeah.
just a few words about this.
Just to enhance what was just said, the loyal customers are, like everybody, stressed, are insecure. So what you have to do, and a lot of companies I know now are trying to give a sense of serenity in the product. No rush, no growth talk, serenity. You're comfortable, you're home, we treat you as a friend. And that is something which has been disappearing in the hospitality to a certain extent, and is coming back. And those destinations and those hotels will gain customer future loyalty also.
Thank you, Jean-Claude. I'm going to stick with you, actually, because, you know, I want to go forward to reopening. And are you, as local regulations allow it and people starting to reopen, with the risk of demand opening slowly, what's your view, on the financial situation of properties? What's your view on spas opening as quickly as possible?
Well, the impression I get is that hotels will reopen spas in 2 or 3 months. And they will have to give that sense of safety, of course, but also serenity, that yes, you can come, you are loyal customers, we treat you like you were at home. And it's gonna take a couple of months. It's not going to come like that. That's it.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
So, I'm going to ask the same question to Trent. What about the reopening, and how quickly should we do it, and its financial implications?
Well, look, the early bird catches the worm unless it gets eaten by an owl. So the idea of coming out of the gate early is great, but it's a question of your business's financial stability. Can you actually sustain an occupancy of 30% in the hotel? Can you sustain your spa business with 1 or 2 guests a day? And some businesses can, some can't. It's the same reason why a lot of restaurants and other businesses have delayed opening in countries, even though they're allowed to, because the economics don't make sense, because they've just got too many overhead costs by opening up for too little guests. And that's the same thing that I think will delay air travel and ship travel and a whole bunch of other stuff a little bit further. But look, I'm in favor of opening as quickly as you can, as lean as you can, as I talked about earlier, stay as agile as you can, because no matter how much you think you've got the plan worked out, reality's got a habit of kicking you in the curlies. And I think the quicker you open and the quicker you experiment with that, the quicker you find out what's working and what's not. And the other thing I'd just say is, I don't hear a lot of people talking to their guests, customers, clients about what they're feeling, what they're wanting. There's a lot of talk from people like us saying what we think the way it's going to go, or governments telling us the way it should be. But I haven't heard a lot of feedback from the customer client side about what they actually want out of this. And I think that's a big part of the conversation that's missing, at least from what I've seen so far.
And that's, interesting, because we do a lot of work with salons in the UK and elsewhere, and they tend to have, I'm generalizing massively, a very obviously local and a strong personal link. And those that have been doing good jobs of reaching out, say they have huge waiting lists. They're talking about having VIP clubs. When they ask the question, do you want us to open when we're allowed? There's a huge response, and it actually cheers them up no end. And we had a great speaker, Christoph Adanson of the group Planet Fitness, and he said obviously he takes the example of a property in France, in Paris, where you get full rate and rent relief when you're closed, so that wouldn't make sense for them to open. But he also pointed to lots of other examples of the business, build it and they will come. As you said, Trent, people will make mistakes, so you iron those out. But also, you're open, and where you can afford to open, business builds. There's so often that business builds on that.
Yeah, but Mark, if I could just jump in. Sorry, Adam. If I can just jump in on that quick point. I think we've had a habit in this industry of being a demand-led business, not a supply-led business. And I think that's dangerous when it comes to the spa business in general and hotel spas specifically. This idea of build it and they will come, it worked out great for Kevin Costner in Field of Dreams, but being early is the same as being wrong, all those kind of cliches that are out there. And I think what we do is we just assume if we build a nice spa, people will come. And I think it's important to get the supply side right before we worry about the demand side.
Interesting.
And I'll just kind of build off of Trent, what you were saying, or Mark, what you were saying quickly, as this idea of, we talked earlier in our conversation about branding and building that customer love and equity with customers. This idea of trying to figure out when is the right time to reopen is an opportunity for customer engagement. Two brands that and a lot of brands have put out surveys and asked questions about like, what should reopening look like? But two brands I'll call out that I think have done an exceptionally good job in totally different businesses. One's Exhale, which is now part of Hyatt, which is kind of a small to medium-sized spa brand in the US. And the other is Virgin Voyages. Virgin was about to launch their first cruise ship before the pandemic happened. And both of those brands put out surveys to customers that were very engaging, very on brand in their tone of voice. Really, at the end of the day, it was a piece to build customer connection and love with their customers. It did ask those critical questions, and my advice would be to others, if you're as you're trying to talk to your customers, be very transparent. And how do you try to communicate in your brand voice to build that marketing love over time? Assuming you do reopen one day, you want to build a stronger connection and use these kind of questioning opportunities as a mechanism to do that.
Yeah, I'd like to tag on to what Adam was saying about consistent messaging and branding and engagement. And what I've been seeing is that there are destination marketers that are taking the time to prepare for recovery using multi-channel marketing campaigns, so they stay top of mind. And one of the things that I found really interesting in some recent research from the World Food Travel Association is the fact that the words local and authentic no longer resonate with travelers. I thought that was really interesting, because then what do you do with content delivery? And the answer is, you put the spotlight on the product and the person. And I saw a great example of that actually the other day on YouTube. It was actually on Facebook. It was the Sixth Senses Bhutan, and they had a training manager who was teaching this really beautiful mantra about compassion and benefiting the universe. And something like that, where it's intimate, you're addressing the stress of today, the stress of self-quarantine. You have a trainer who is in a beautiful area. That is something I think that talks and speaks to connection. So I just wanted to throw that in as an example.
Thank you. Andrew, I know you've got thoughts on this.
Yeah, first of all, I would just recommend everybody that's listening or watching on this to click on their chat at the bottom of the Zoom and read all of the comments and things there. There's some great information flowing on that side. So there's a whole side issue going on there, which is really good. The second thing I would say is that there's a whole load of surveys going out, and they really are getting to the heart of it. We need data to inform us. Catherine's just put one on the chat channel. The Wellness Tourism Association also has a survey that is being out to everybody in the industry. That's through Laszlo in Budapest. So please participate in those. I think we're going to have I'm very much in favor of planned and a coordinated approach of to the relaxation of social restrictions. You can't expect everything's just going to restore to normal and it'll all be back to normal. The travel industry has very many companies that are totally dependent on each other. So there's little point in opening up your resort if the public simply can't get there because the airlines aren't operating to capacity. So in summary, because again, we've got so many different things to cover, I think that we'll reopen with marginal occupancies initially. And in general, I think wise staffing, promotion of services, sufficient cash backup are going to be absolute critical for many months after opening. And I think you have to take those into consideration. And as I just said earlier, focus on the experience you're providing, focus on that experience for the guests, because that is what's going to drive them to come to you. Try to understand what your guests and what they're coming for. I don't believe it's necessarily the destination anymore, it's more the experience.
Thank you, Andrew. We are something like 15 minutes away from the end of this session, absolute maximum. If you are listening to this session from any of your platforms, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, know that if you go to the website of professionalbeauty.co.uk or any Facebook page of your local professional beauty in the GCC, South Africa, India, or UK, you can see the link on registering, and then you'll have access to the fantastic conversation, links, advice in the chat box of that Zoom. So registration is absolutely free. It would be a pity for you to miss this part. With the few minutes remaining, Mark started saying that wellness tourism had been a very strong trend before COVID-19. Don't you think, and this is a question for all of you, and maybe we'll start with Trent and then Adam, who I know has a big opinion on this. What about the wellness bashing that we could have soon with everyone saying, sure, we're wellness. I mean, of course, physical wellness, of course, mental wellness. And there was a time everyone wanted to be spa and wellness, and we saw the result of that. Won't we have even more wellness bashing? Trent first, Adam, and then it's open.
Yeah, I think we will. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we've got as an industry. It's one of the biggest challenges we faced, I think, as a spa industry. I think there was a certain opaqueness to what we did. And for many of us, for many of them, not us, for many people out there, I think that's probably still true. You know, it's a bit of a Wizard of Oz scenario where behind the curtain at the end, there's this big voice echoing, but it's just some little fat bald guy with a microphone or the megaphone. You know, I think wellness washing is a real issue. I think there's a certain amount of what's going to happen is hotel GMs are going to run to the shiny new thing again, just like they did with spas 25 years ago. They needed a USP. They wanted something different. We presented them with the hotel spa. They loved it. And we went on an absolute tear for a good sort of 5-10 years. I think the same thing is going to happen with wellness. It was already happening, but I think what delayed it perhaps was a lack of understanding. The number of conversations I've had with GMs over the years, I want wellness in my hotel. Great. What exactly did you want? You know, wellness. What, you know, like yoga, I don't know. So they don't get what wellness is. So that's up to us. It's a great opportunity, but it's also a lot of confusion out there. So I guess the short answer is yes, there is going to be a hell of a lot of wellness washing out there. And I think it's a great term.
Adam, back to you, because you are the one during the preparation who raised that topic of wellness bashing after greenwashing. So please expand on that.
Look, I think there's the challenge that we can't all overcome. You know, we can't solve the problem, or we can't define it specifically. What we can do is do things together to solve it. And that starts with clear communication and authenticity. So one area that I definitely am seeing a huge movement in, particularly in the US and North America, looking at the overlap between wellness and luxury. Before the virus, look at the number of reports, and whether it's B2B publications like Hospitality Designs of the world, or Skiffs of the world, or consumer publications like Travel and Leisure, or far, how they began to really kind of overlap what is the future of luxury and wellness. Whether or not they've defined wellness, it's the idea of luxury and wellness are this one thing people are looking for together. And wellness has effectively become this ubiquitous word that is anything travel. I think the way that we overcome that is we start to communicate to people what is it that we're specifically offering, whether that is very clear criteria for the types of programs a property has, or if it's that a property or a spa is all about connecting people to nature and it's about being outdoors, or it's not about a spa at all and it's, you know, an experience like a forest bathing experience to be outside and connect in a very natural setting back with the earth. Those are all aspects of wellness, as is cleanliness and like focusing on programs that are all around sanitation. I think our opportunity is to just not bubble everything up under the word wellness, but instead start to define the actual offer. And I think it goes back honestly to the group, to our earlier conversation around experiences. You can communicate the experience you offer and then tell guests how, or tell your customer, whatever you are, whether you're a spa or a resort, how it could be a very good value for them over other things they can buy. That's the best opportunity to win. So my view is stop focusing on the big mega word. It's kind of the hook word. Focus on the components that you're offering and then how you can line up with whoever your target customer is. That's where I see the biggest opportunity for us all in the future.
Thank you, Adam. Andrew, you'll be the last one to answer on this, and then I have one very last question to Camille.
Okay, so 20 years ago, nobody knew what a spa was. Some people thought it was a place in your country. But today, everybody's got a general picture of what spa is, and I'm sure there are many, many different definitions. And over the years, we've had dog spas, dental spas, and incredible misuses of the word, if we want to think of the purest sense of it. And that's what we're going through now with wellness. If you think about, it was now 12 years ago that the Global Spa Summit was created, and today it's the Global Wellness Summit. And I'm not actually particularly too worried that there is misuse of the word. I'm actually encouraged that there is media attention, there is world attention on this concept of wellness, albeit a very vague term. What it does is it makes more and more people aware of the industry, more and more people are interested in it, and then it's up to each individual business to define who they are and how they're going to attract their customers.
Thank you. My very last question to Camille, as we were preparing, you mentioned that among the words you see come stronger and stronger in the literature of wellness tourism is dreaming, the dream vacation you want to take when things reopen.
Yes, thank you, Jean-Guy. So yeah, I have seen dreaming used by destinations and by marketers in terms of creating this, the dream vacation. You know, why wait? We know that, you know, things have been delayed with COVID-19. So the idea is now that I see lots of content and I see a lot of, especially videos. There's Hidden Doorways that has had a very interesting video that came out on dreaming, and they spotlighted 15 different wellness destinations. And then I also saw, and Andrew, you might have noticed this, Arizona's new Rediscover campaign. And so the idea of rediscovery, transformation, connectivity, fulfillment, these are all part of wellness. And their campaign was very interesting in that it focuses on natural beauty and a sense of a wonderment and reconnection. Of course, it starts locally with the Arizona residents starting to explore what's in their neighborhood, and then they're planning to expand it to the drive market for neighboring states, and then eventually to short haul. I also found interesting in terms of destination marketing, I saw that the German National Tourist Board had Discover Germany from Home, and I thought that was interesting because they're using in their hashtag, so it's hashtag Discover Germany from Home. In their marketing campaign, they're using existing hashtags like stay safe, hashtag stay at home, hashtag travel tomorrow. And all of these types of contents are whetting our appetite for traveling. And I think that's good. I think also that, again, to go back to, and I just want to address, because I didn't have the opportunity to kind of pitch in with Adam's comment about broadening the definition of wellness travel. And I think this is really important. So I think the prevailing understanding is it's traveling to improve your health in mind, body, and spirit. And I think that's a great start. I also think it's really important that we look at the psychological profile of wellness travelers. I just talked about discovery, connection, fulfillment, and transformation. And this is really important in terms of the customer journey. And then there's a third component, which is positive engagement with people, cultures, and nature. And again, Adam had talked about the importance of nature. Andrew had talked about, branding and connecting with others. And this is a definition that Wellness Tourism Worldwide, my company, looked at very heavily for a year. We researched it, and we looked at motivation theory, we looked at achievement theory, we looked at wellness theory, and we also looked at positive psychology. And I just want to mention that because the improving one's sense of well-being and health in mind, body, and spirit is great, but it puts the emphasis on that person. It's very ego-centric. Whereas I believe wellness travel involves, just as we've discussed, so many of the panelists have discussed, sustainability, corporate responsibility, responsibility to employees, responsibility to the community. So I think that's an important part to mention. And thank you for that opportunity, Jean-Guy.
Thank you, Camille. Back to you, Mark.
Thank you. Look, we're running out of time. I will just take one question from the audience, as it were. Nikki Page. There's something that hasn't come up that much in our recent discussions, but she's asked, how can we ensure the safety and security of our overseas staff living in communal staff areas? And they're supporting luxury hotels and tourism and wellness facilities. So, to reassure them and also our guests that they're not bringing the virus. Does anybody want to have any thoughts on that from the panel? You want to put up your hand or say something?
So I think that that's where we're talking about how do companies become admired, is the way that they look after and treat their employees as well as they look after the guests. And I think it's easier if you're in a local area where you have all of the kind of support that you could have, and people don't necessarily live in shared accommodation. It gets more complex. So I think, to Nikki's point, it's probably more focused on, let's say, my experience is the Maldives, where you've got a small island and you've got a staff village in the center of the island, and you've often got dormitory accommodation. Well, of course, there's no business at the moment, so you're probably sending your people home, back to their home destinations. If they didn't, then and you are on the island now, then you're probably very carefully considering about the accommodation situation. You have no guests in house, so you have the ability to spread the people out if they're contained on the island. So what are we doing, Nikki? It's very much up to each individual location, but it's very much how they care for their people. I don't think there's any shortage of advice on how to care for people. There's no shortage. If you go to Global Wellness Institute, they've got every piece of research on how to look after and accommodate your employees and your guests. If you go to iSpa, they've got all their post-COVID recommendations on how to treat both guests and employees. So there's no shortage of information. It's actually how you actually execute and deliver it. That's the key.
Trent, do you want to have the last word?
Yeah, all right. Look, we had a lot of issues pre-lockdown trying to work out when to get people out of the place. And in some cases, because we've got spas all over the world, some of those locations are remote, some aren't. Some of them we've got great confidence in our hotel partner to take real good care of our people. And quite frankly, some we don't. And so there was a case of us trying to get people out even before the lockdowns had started, before the hotels had said, please close the spa, or we decided to close the spa. In terms of looking after them, it's again, finding all the things that we know we need to do, but it's the communication particularly that is most important back to their families, to let them know what's going on, that they're safe, to make sure they can all call people and let them know where they are and when they're coming home as best as possible, but also not send them on a flight journey that is going to send them on 3 or 4 different legs of a flight where they may not get through transit in another country. So, you know, shelter at home, shelter in place was a lot of our strategy wherever we could. If we couldn't, we'd get them out as quick as we could.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm just looking at our chat. Thank you for the many communications. This has been very inspirational, fantastic points and recommendations. There's been a lot of positivity on the chat. Andrew Gibson, Catherine Droger, Trent Monday, Camille Hoheb, Adam Glickman, Jean-Claude Baumgarten, and of course, Jean-Guy from World Wellness Weekend. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very, very much. Our next panel is at 3:30. See you very soon.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Au revoir.